celebrating the power of possibility.
I'm Congressman Jimmy Duncan, and I believe that anything is possible.
Welcome to another edition of Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill. These are great stories about great people whose lives prove that anything is possible. And I got to tell you, after, I guess we're well over 500 episodes, I've met some incredible people. I mean, really incredible people. Along the way, though, I've met some people that I get to call friend. And today, I get to spend time with one of my great friends. He happens to be our former Congressman, Congressman Duncan Jr.
Yeah.
Those of us who know and love him call him Jimmy Duncan.
Right.
Welcome to Anything is Possible.
Well, Halloran, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor for me to be here with you. My dad told me many years ago, he said, you know how long it takes them to forget you once you leave office? Said about as long as it takes the ripples to disappear when you throw a rock in the water. And so I'm glad that you haven't forgotten me.
No, would never do that. We're friends,
Right.
So full disclosure, I love this guy. He's one of my dear friends. I want to talk about something that I don't know that we've ever talked about on television. Your acumen and skill, your QBR rating as a quarterback. One of my favorite memories of time spent together is you would host parties at your house,
Right.
and they would be junk food parties.
Yes, I called it the pigskin pig out, and I always put a sign on the front door that said, do not enter this door without having a sack of junk food. And boy, we had the biggest collection of junk food for some of those football games that totally do not, I think I put on there, do not come in with anything healthy.
And we would not. Two things I remember. One, at halftime of whatever game it was for the pigskin pig out, we would play touch football in your front yard, and you were always the quarterback, and you were quite good, although nobody wanted to sack a sitting congressman at that time. Number two, your son Zane, his skill level in eating wings is legendary.
Yes. I'll tell you another thing I remember. I remember one time you and your family were with us, I think maybe at Thanksgiving, and we had this this contest afterwards where you had drawings for our prizes, and one of my little granddaughters desperately wanted to win this gigantic Hershey bar.
Gigantic Hershey's bar.
You won it, and you saw how much she wanted. You gave her, you traded gifts with her, and I still remember how kind that was. But you've been...
Where is she now?
Well, she's just started at UT.
Wow.
And so, but you've always been a great friend, and you haven't hesitated to ask me tough questions over there, and you've been a good reporter, and but you've been a great friend too, and so I always
thank you for being here today.
that.
You never hesitated to answer tough questions, by the way. Let's catch up on your life since Congress. How many years did you serve in Congress?
I served there 30 years. I had 16 years as a lawyer and a judge, and 30 years in Congress. And you know, when you're in politics, you look at the obituaries every day, and I started noticing that half the men were dying younger than me. And so in the last, you remember my late wife, Lynn, and she had 2 strokes, and then cancer spread through her body. In her last 3.5 years, she was in a wheelchair. And so I needed to be at home, and so I'm happy that I was able to spend that time with her. And but shock of all shocks, 7 months after Lynn died, I went to a church supper, and I sat by a woman who I had been in Sunday school and Bible school with as toddlers, who I've known all my life. And 3.5 months after that, we got married 15 months ago, and it's been wonderful. And I have 4 grown children and 9 grandchildren, and she has 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren, and counting spouses, that adds up to 31, and they're all here in Knoxville.
That is amazing.
And so every week we're going to, in fact, Saturday we've got a birthday party for one of her grandsons, and that morning I've got 2 football games, one for a 8-year-old and one for an 11-year-old.
Possibility powered by Pilot Flying J, Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel.
So talk to me about that part of your journey where you leave Congress and you come back to take care of your wife. That had to be a difficult transition because you guys were married for so long and she was such a part of everything you did.
Well, I said that Lynn was so good to me, and she handled her dying better. I was amazed because she never whined. All she wanted me to do the last few weeks she was alive was sit there and hold her hand. And
you know what? I remember calling to check on her, mm-hmm. and I remember one of her friends from church fussing at her because she was in the wheelchair, but she was still trying to cook for everybody.
Well, she loved to cook. She loved to entertain people. But one of her friends from church called her and told her how sorry she was that she was going through this. And Lynn told her, she said, Trudy, she said, if I get well, I'll be fine. And if I don't get well, I'll be in heaven. And either way, I'll be all right. And she meant that.
How did that affect you, though?
Well,
because I don't know that I've ever had a conversation with you about you, because you've had to maintain, and maybe you learned this from your father, but you've had to maintain. You're one of the most consistent people I've ever met.
Well, thank you.
When I see you today, when I see you tomorrow, next week, you stay the same. But what I know from my personal experience, developing that ability to show up, do your job, be consistent, and that was wired into you by your dad, who was legendary, and your whole family. Living a public life, you learn to put your feelings aside, show up and do the work. But then I don't know if you can always cover what you're really feeling. It comes out somewhere. And I've always wondered how my friend, Jimmy Duncan, what was going on inside your heart and your mind and your soul?
Well, I had a great example with my dad. Dad was one of 10 children. He hitchhiked into Knoxville with $5 in his pocket, didn't know anybody, had no contacts here. And a friend of mine, Ray Hill, told me a few years ago, he said, you won the lottery with parents. And I never thought of it that way, but as soon as he said that, I thought, that's really true. My dad was the kindest, sweetest, toughest, hardest working man I ever knew. I meant tough in a good way because he expected a lot out of us. He was a little softer on my sisters, but on me and my brother, if I ever had anything wrong with me, he always said, oh, it's just in your head, and so, and then my mother was from Iowa and had come here to visit. When she finished college in Iowa, she came here to visit one of her older sisters whose husband had gotten a job at TVA, an engineering graduate from the University of Iowa, and her sister talked her into staying, and she was 2 years older than my dad, who was a student at UT, and they met, and 3 months later they were married in Iowa City, Iowa. So I've always said I have a real high opinion of women from the Midwest because I thought my mother was the sweetest woman around, but now I've been greatly blessed. My second wife the minister who married us said that this was the first time he had married a couple with 97 years of marriage between them, because
Wow.
she had a long marriage. Her husband was a Presbyterian minister and teacher who had passed away with Lou Gehrig's disease, and so she went through a very
So
difficult...
she had to take care of her husband. You had to take care of your...
He passed away a
wife.
few months before Lynn, so both of us went through tough times, but I've known her family all my life. I said it just took me 74 years to work my way into her family, so...
Was that kind of the way you got through? Because she understood. She got it.
Well, it was a total surprise, I think, to both of us that we got, remarried. But I think it's been a great blessing, really.
Your time in Congress, you were unique to me. I was mentioning this before we started the interview. You, to me, represent... You're a statesman to me. I know who you are. I know where you stand. I know what you believe. There's no doubt about it. I saw this show up many, many times. You're definitely a fiscal conservative. You're a conservative, but your love of people, I never saw your political ideology change the way you treat people in general. If there was a constituent that reached out to you, it was just known throughout the district. It was known all over the country. You call Jimmy Duncan in his office. If you are a constituent in that district, they're going to do everything they can to help you. So many people that Social Security, people that had issues with military stuff, people that had any kind of issue, that constituent service piece had nothing whatsoever to do with ideology at all. It's different now in America. First of all, who taught you to be that way? And secondly, what do you think of where we are right now?
Well, first of all, once again, I'll say I learned a lot from my dad. I don't know how many times I was with him, and some people would walk up and say, "John, you're the only Republican that I vote for." And he treated everybody really good. I was proud of him. He led the peaceful integration of Knoxville during a very difficult time as mayor of Knoxville, and got 90% of the black vote in 3 races for mayor, which is, of course, totally unheard of for Republicans now. I think I'm the only Republican member of Congress who was ever the Grand Marshal of the Martin Luther King Day Parade, and so I've continued in that respect. And I always said I have 750,000 bosses, and I tried to treat people that way. But I really think that I tried to treat people the same way that you treat your listeners on the radio, because so often I've listened to you treat with fairness and kindness people that maybe even were calling in not liking something you had said. And so it's sad, a little bit sad, I think, that people seem to be not getting along as well in Washington. But I got treated as well by the Democrats as I did by my fellow Republicans when I was in there. And the Democrats were in control 16 of my 30 years in Washington, and so I thought it was important for me to try to get along with everybody so I could do some things for my constituents, even when my party was in the minority.
So I wanted to talk to you. You wrote a book.
Yes.
Title of your book is?
It's From Bat Boy to Congressman, 30 Years in the U.S. House. And I've been getting just a great response. In fact, I think it's sold more books than the UT Press has ever had, except for maybe professors who can force their students to buy their books. But about half the book is humorous. It's all true. It's about 60 pages of just little short vignettes or stories, and I've got stories in there like sex on an airplane, desperate housewives, the only time the word urinated was in an obituary, tell about the little boy who wrote me and said if he got 2 million signatures, would I do away with homework? And he said homework was putting kids in was messing with their morals and putting kids in a state from which they might never recover. And it's just, and I tell stories about all the presidents with whom I served, and I've been very pleased at the response that it's gotten.
Talk to me a little bit about why you've tried to maintain such good humor.
I don't know, but I just, it seemed that my whole life, as a lawyer and as a judge and in Congress, I just ran into more strange, funny, unusual cases. I mean, and situations. And Zane Daniel and I, in our law practice, we represented just ordinary people mostly. Another lawyer told Zane one time on the elevator, said, "Zane, all your clients come up here wearing bibbed overalls and with mud on their boots." And Zane said, "Yes, Herb, but they come up here with those bibs just stuffed full of money." And I handled everything from a dog bite case to murders, and I had one man that built his house on the wrong piece of property, and I represented pimps and prostitutes and ministers and churches. And I feel like in my life, I've known about the widest group of people that you could ever imagine, from murderers to presidents. And actually, though, I feel so blessed because if somebody had told me when I graduated from law school that I was going to have the law practice that I had and the judgeship that I had, and then spend 30 years in Congress, I'm not independently wealthy, but I would have said, where do I sign up? And I feel so lucky. I tried the attempted murder of James Earl Ray, but I made it, and that was such a high, tense, high-profile type case. They brought James Earl Ray into my court with more security than if he was the president. And they wanted to take a recess and brought him back into my office. And so I'm sitting there in my office with these two TBI agents and James Earl Ray, and he was back in the back of the office, and he started whimpering or crying, and we weren't even talking to him at that point. And I think maybe his time in the prison had affected his mind or something, but I made the worst mistake any judge has ever made. I got really high ratings from the Bar Association about my judgeship, but when the James Earl Ray case, we went back into court, and I said in this tough judicial voice, I said, "General Jolly, you want to begin your questions?" And he said, "Well, yes, Your Honor, but don't you think you should bring the jury back in first?" It was the only time I'd ever forgotten the jury, and there wasn't a good way you could recover from something like that. So,
the fact that you have such an interesting life and all these stories, I want to delve into some of the stories. But this notion of keeping a positive attitude, having good humor, you're in the world of public service, you're in the world of politics. Is there could you give some advice on how to maintain that good humor? And is that part of a God thing for you?
I don't know. I think maybe the main thing is I've figured out from my law practice and way back that everybody gets hurt by life. Everybody. If you knew the story of everybody who's in a restaurant, say, eating, there might be one in there that's got terminal cancer. There might be another one in there who lost a child at some point. Everybody, unfortunately, gets hurt by life, and everybody needs help. And Elvis Presley has a song about don't criticize or confuse until you walk in another man's shoes. And so, I tried to always, I thought my goal was to help as many people as I could for as long as I could.
If you were giving a young person advice that's thinking about a life of public service and the possibility of doing that well, what are some of the tips that you would give?
Well, I think the most important thing is just hard work. I mean, I have had the good fortune to meet a lot of people, very successful people throughout my life, and all of them. I think the key has been a willingness to work hard, and everybody gets knocked down by life. The most important thing is when you get knocked down to get back up. And I always loved that Theodore Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena. And the man who, in the end, if he succeeds, knows the triumph of high achievement, and if at the worst he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Because nobody wins every battle. So, but I just feel like I've been very, very lucky in my life, and I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful to a lot of people.
And we are grateful to you. Jimmy Duncan, I love you, brother.
Well, I love you, Halloran.
Thank you for being here with us today.
Well, it's been an honor.
Let's play some football.
Okay.